Today we're going to look at this bike. This is a 2010 Ninja 250R. I used to have an 08 Ninja 250 that I put 87,000 miles on. This one only has 7,000 miles. Let me tell you why this bike is one of the better deals you can possibly get on the internet right now. I think the headlights of the Ninja 250 kind of look like almost the new design of the KLR 650. They do resemble each other, especially with the spiky wings up here. It almost looks like a very cartoony version. It's aggressive without being too angular and aggressive. I do appreciate that about Kawasaki, that they really revamped this new Kawasaki Ninja. At the time in 2008, it was kind of controversial. They did do a great job designing it, and the old Ninja 250 was just so 80s, so retro, that when this thing came out, everybody was blown away by it. Of course, right now it's a little bit antiquated. The styling is a little bit older because they do have the Ninja 300, 400, and all of these other newer bikes that people prefer. You have your clutch, and it's a very easy clutch feel to it. And on this side you have your high beams, you have your turn signals, and you cancel it by pushing in. And then you have your horn down here. And here is your choke. Then you push it back when you want to start the bike when it's cold out. On this right side, it's very simple. You just have the throttle, you have a kill switch, and your starter. There is a very interesting thing here, and there's a rubber cap on top of this brake master cylinder that you pull out, and it's threaded for mirrors. So this is almost exactly the same system that the old Ninja had, and Kawasaki is just using this from bike to bike. So you could remove the mirrors that come on this bike and put mirrors here. The mirrors on the Kawasaki 250R look great. I've always liked them. You could get an extended stock here for the bike, so you can push it out a little bit, because you do see quite a bit of the shoulders here. So from here to here it's almost non-existent, and then you see a little bit. If they extended it just a little bit more, you could see everything behind you. You know, the stock seat on the 250R is fairly comfortable, and it's stiff, kind of like a sport bike, but because of the seating position, it's just so much more upright. This bike lets you ride for much longer distances than you could possibly a super sport. But it's made out of this fabric that doesn't seem to rip up very much, and you could make it much more comfortable. I've seen people that put different foam in here that makes it more comfortable. I never had any issues, and I've done about 600 miles per trip on this bike, so it's not a big deal. Uses a oil level window, so you can look at the oil level. I find that's very convenient. It's got an oversized oil filler cap, so you don't spill a lot of oil as well. But this engine doesn't make a lot of power, and the valves are very difficult to adjust on this, as opposed to the old Ninja 250. The foot pegs are very comfortable. It's got a lot of rubber, and you don't feel a lot of vibration through the foot pegs on this bike. Also, keep in mind it's got a feeler peg. You could remove this if you don't like it, but this is here so when you go around corners, and if you touch the tarmac, it's going to touch this rubber piece before it touches this. But also it curves up, so this is straight out of a sport bike. It'll have the little feelers, and you could lean this bike very hard. It also has very high quality passenger foot pegs. The rear master cylinder sits here, and it's very easy to tell the level, the brake fluid, and it's easy to pop out in case you need to add some fluid in there. This bike is very easy to adjust. The chain, you have these two nuts, and that's how you adjust it from side to side. It's got these nuts, and you just loosen this nut, push it back, and you have the way to adjust the chain right here based on the notch. The chain is actually fairly good. It's a little rusted out from just sitting, but I think I'll keep the chain for a while. And of course, one of the nice things that Kawasaki did was make these rotors. It's kind of like the warp rotor with the little notches. I think it looks pretty good. To open the rear passenger peg, all you have to do is put your key and twist it. You can pop it up. In the rear passenger pocket. You do have space for a toolkit that I've removed, and it's held with this rubber band throughout, and you put your toolkit here, or you can remove this and put whatever you want in there. Some people put the manual. This one has got an aftermarket tail, so it's been kind of cut through here, so it's a little bit exposed. There are some issues with it, but it's no big deal. But normally a lot of these sport bikes don't have any space at all to put anything, so I do like that the Kawasaki 250 lets you put some tools here in case you need to work on your bike. You do have the ability of locking the steering by turning the wheel and pushing it to the left. One of the very nice things that Kawasaki did was give 250 riders a fuel gauge. This is kind of important and something I really appreciate, because this bike gets 70 miles to the gallon. It is nice to see what you got in the tank. And on this gauge, of course, this is antiquated because it's so large and it's got these analog gauges. It also has a temperature gauge right in there. In the middle, you have your speedometer, which is the business end of this motorcycle. It's directly in front of you, which is nice. And you have your odometer. This one's got 7,392 miles. And down here, you have your trip. And to reset your trip, all you have is this button. And this is very analog. This does not break very often. You know, you don't have a lot of malfunctions with electronics because there's none. On this left side, you have your tachometer, and you have your oil level light here. This thing revs to 12,000, really 13,000 red line, and 15,000 if you really go extreme. But most of the time, you're going to be like working with 7,000 to 10,000 RPMs. To get the most out of the engine, it makes the most power up here. And some riders like to ride more, like 4 to 7. But if you ride in a spirited fashion, you're going to be using the high RPMs. This is very different than the NC700X that I have. It's nice that Kawasaki gave you a very nice filler cap. And even Honda is so cheap not to give you this sort of style. But it makes a whole lot more sense to have this than the types of caps that you have to unbolt and put it somewhere on the bike. I do appreciate that did not save money by putting another sort of filler. This is a very good touch. It's what a sport bike should have. One of the benefits of this newer Ninja 250 is that it has 17-inch wheels both in the rear and the front. The older Ninja 250 had 16-inch wheels, and it made it hard to find rubber, and also didn't corner as well as this one. This bike still looks extremely contemporary, even though we're in 2010 and this is a 10-year-old bike. I don't think it really looks it. And if these bikes are well maintained, they do last for a very long time. And a lot of people, they even wonder, why should they get a Ninja 250 to start out with when they can get other bikes? First, they're very inexpensive, especially these carbureted bikes. And a lot of people prefer on working on carbureted bikes than fuel injection bikes. But for me, I do prefer fuel injection. But I still think that this bike is such a good bang for the buck. You can get these really cheap with very low miles, because people that generally get 250s, they buy them and then they eventually sell them almost right away within the season. Let's go ahead and start the bike so you can hear it purr. It's a very quiet bike, but it's got an inline 2 engine. That's pretty much the idle. This bike is not going to win any races, but it is a very fun bike, and you would think that perhaps a slow moving vehicle would not be fun, but for the same reason scooters are fun, this bike is particularly fun because it looks great. It sounds good when it's revving really high. It doesn't sound good when it's at idle, because it's not that type of bike. It's an inline 2, and it's very easy to work on. It's very durable, reliable. There are competitors for this bike. There's the CBRs and there's the Ninja 300s. But for me, if you have something like this and you ride it for a season, if you buy this cheap enough, you could ride it for a whole year, sell it the next year for the same price that you bought it. There is a demand for Ninja 250s. They have an almost cult-like following. And of course the Ninja brand has been extremely popular throughout the 80s and 90s. And into 2000s, it's kind of died off a little bit. I believe that 2008, with this new design of the Ninja 250, I think it got more people interested in riding Kawasaki's again, because this used to be a big CBR fest out there. And now, this is why Kawasaki needs a entry-level sport bike, because this gets people interested in their lineup a little bit more than all the other bikes. The engine on this bike is an inline 2. I do prefer the inline 2 in the old Ninja 250s, mainly because it's a lot easier to work on the old version of the Ninja 250 rather than this. So Kawasaki did a very interesting job, is that for the new redesign in 2008, they went with a much more sporty version of the 250 as opposed to a touring version of the 250. The touring version of the 250 was almost like a mini Kawasaki Concours. And the Kawasaki Concours, it was very like 80s styling, very retro, but it also had something really good that this one does not have, and that's a center stand. There's not really a point of a center stand in a sport bike, because a lot of the people that are going to be getting this bike are going to be people who are more into recreation rather than touring or commuting. And I think that's what this bike does. It gives people a way to get into sport biking without breaking the bank. And this bike does corner extremely well for what it is. This thing is just as competent as any other bike. You're going to be lacking on the highway because it is so light, and it does feel much lighter than what it is. And if you're overtaking cars, this is going to be a little bit of a struggle, because you're going to have to downshift much further, much ahead of time in order to pass a car. If you had a 600 or 1000, you could overtake a car just by downshifting one gear, and that would be that. But this one requires a lot of commitment to overtake cars. You can have 250 miles worth of fun with just $6. And with a lot of bikes, man, with bikes being bigger, more powerful, you're running through tires much quicker. The tires for this thing are much cheaper because they're just very small, thin 17-inch tires. This bike on a daily basis, it's not going to give you any problems, and most people never pile on a lot of miles. So this bike is a very good bike for people that ride. This is their first bike, you're riding casually, you want a bike to commute on, and you're going to ride it on a daily basis. But because of the fuel injection, or because of the lack of fuel injection, you're getting a bike that if you put it away for the winter, you might have problems starting it up if you don't winterize it properly. So if you're not going to ride this bike, you need to be aware of how to winterize it. And for me, the idea, oh, he's on the wrong side of the road. The idea of winterizing a bike is kind of a pain in the ass. That's why I really like the fuel injection bikes. You know, you just get on them and ride. But with these now older 250s, is that you can get amazing deals on them. You know, you can get a very low mileage Ninja 250 for what, like $2,000, maybe $1,500, $2,000. So, and there's a lot to be said about getting a 250. First of all, I think they make you a better rider, because you have to constantly be shifting gears, and shifting gears is kind of fun to do if you have a 250, because you're constantly putting it in gear and giving it full throttle. And you can rev this bike really high. It revs to 12,000 RPMs. In comparison, my NC700, which is an inline 2, it revs to 6,000, so half of this one. This thing just revs to the moon. Also, with the Ninja 250, you have a large community of like-minded riders, and they've done a lot of the homework for you. So you can get parts from other bikes to fit here. You know, for a 250, it doesn't sound good when it's idling, but when it's actually moving, the high revving nature of this bike, it sounds like a race bike, and then you look down and you're going like 60 miles an hour, which is slow. And I think that's the reason I bought the 08 Ninja 250 after I sold my ST 1300. I was tired of getting speeding tickets, because on the FJR or ST 1300 you have a rocket and you're basically going 100 miles an hour all the time, and you think you're going 40. Now this one at 60 miles an hour feels like you're going 100 miles an hour. That's the beauty of it. It fools you.